Aloha mai kako. Aloha mai. As is tradition here, Mānoa, we're going to open with oli. If you know Velina Mānoa, please feel free to join. If you don't know it, please just hanu ameha, just continue breathing and holding space. And for now, I'll ask everyone to stand. Let's only other ways from here. Velina Mānoa. Velina Mānoa I kalehua aloha, aloha watu wahine. Mai wahine ai waikiki, kia I ke kahaukani. Kani no na leo, e o kamaina, aina aloha. Mānoa. Elua pa'i, 2 claps. Mahalo nui.
Thank you, Lahui. Welcome to the Women, Gender, Sexuality Studies, American Studies, Ethnic Studies, joint monthly colloquium, though it might feel a little confusing because we just had one last week. So at this point, we're a weekly colloquium. So I really appreciate all of you showing up once again this week to spend time with us, to learn from our guest speaker, and to build community, which is what I and Joyce Mariano from American Studies and Ethan Caldwell are always hoping to do and aiming to do as we plan these events. Before we begin, I want to let you know about our next one, which is next week, just kidding. March 6th, Lisa Vallon, who is one of our beloved faculty members in WGSS, will be, do I look at her cute picture? I love her so much. She'll be speaking with us next month, so we hope you can save the date and join us again. So each month, each of us invites a speaker to share their intellectual project, their political work with us here. And today, our guest was Ethan's guest, but Ethan has a little baby sick today. So we're thinking about Wesley and hoping he gets better. So in Ethan's stead, Ryan Moran, who is in the Ethnic Studies department and actually just gave a colloquium talk just a few months ago, and I told him, look how quickly we put you to work. Once you speak for us, then you've joined the crew, so watch out, Noah.
Okay.
I'm happy to welcome Ryan to introduce Noah before, so we can begin.
Great. Yes, unfortunately Wesley was sick, so in Ethan's stead. Dr. Noah Hanohano Dolim is an assistant professor in the history department at the University of Hawaii. He was raised in Kunia on the island of Oahu and has ancestral ties to Puna and Hilo, Hawaii. His work primarily focuses on 19th century Hawaii, emphasizing the histories, experiences, and lifeways of Kanaka Oiwi. Noah's current project centers on elite wahine political leadership outside of formal governmental structures and institutions, and their creation of sovereignties beyond the nation state between the late 19th and early 20th centuries. His research attends to the intersections of gender, race, settler colonialism, and imperialism, and we are all really excited for his talk today. So, Noah, please come up and we look forward to your talk. Should I get the light?
Oh, I can do it.
Okay.
Okay. Aloha, everyone. Thank you all for coming on a Friday in the middle of a Friday, but these colloquiums are so awesome. Usually I'm sitting over there, but it's nice to be on the other side. Thank you again to the Departments of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies, Ethnic Studies, and American Studies for having me here today. My talk today is based on one chapter of my manuscript titled Organizing Our Futures, Native Hawaiian Women's Clubs, Governance, and Sovereignties, which is about the wahine in the late 19th and early 20th centuries who built and maintained Native Hawaiian sovereignties beyond the nation-state framework. Often overlooked, these chiefly women organized vigorously for Hawaiian education, public health, suffrage, and history-making, both prior to and in the wake of the US-backed overthrow and subsequent illegal annexation. In the second half of the 19th century, Hawaiian women were almost non-existent within the nation-state political structure. Instead, they built women's clubs and mixed-gender societies that drew on authoritative, genealogical, marital, and broader social networks. And this is just like going to what the chapters look like. The first chapter, Relocating Women's Governance, Archive and Historiography, looks at Bernice Pōki Bishop, but in the context of her life rather than the story connected to Kamehameha schools in particular. The third chapter is what I'll be talking about today. The fourth chapter focuses on women's suffrage and citizenship in the early 20th century, so the 19th and then to the 19th Amendment. And then the fifth chapter, History Making and Embodied Performance, looks at Ahuhui Māmakakaua, which is one of our Royal Hawaiian organizations, particularly in the late 1920s. And then the final chapter, which serves as an epilogue, looks at urban Honolulu as a landscape of sovereignty, so kind of an urban history of the wahine and space and sovereignty. As you heard already, I also track continuities from the 19th century and into the 20th century, linking kingdom, republic, and territory, and most importantly, following the lives and legacies of these Hawaiian women. So the project isn't just situated in the Hawaiian Kingdom era, even though technically I'm a 19th century person, it very much straddles that century mark, and very intentionally does so. And again, my presentation today will cover that second chapter. And I can answer any questions about the other chapters in the Q&A as well. Okay, so on January 6, 1912, over 100 babies, some accompanied by their mothers, gathered on the lanai of the Kapi olani Maternity Home. Sounds of excited conversation and joyous laughter filled the afternoon air. Teenage girls from the Kaiahao Seminary and the Kamehameha schools served lemonade, cake, and ice cream. Sounds pretty good. Nearby was a Christmas tree, its limbs drooping under the weight of tiny baby socks filled with candy. But this was not a holiday party, but a celebration of the home's 21st anniversary since its opening in 1890. These babies range from one-month-old infants to 21-year-old adults. But they all had one thing in common: they were all born at the home. With the unwavering support of Ahuhui Ho'oulu Aho'ola Lahui, the society to grow and give life to the nation, the late wahine and Queen Consort, Kapi olani had established this medical institution to improve the health of Native Hawaiian mothers and children. And of course, it's amidst greater population decline amongst Native Hawaiians. Established in 1874, Ahuhui Ho'oulu Aho'ola Lahui was a charitable organization primarily led by a wahine, emerging from Mo'i David Kalakaua's national motto in 1874, Oulu Lahui, to grow the nation. Kalakaua inherited a government that was intent on improving its infrastructure and economic standing, but shrouded in the recurring effects of disease and death. Kalakaua called for the Board of Health to improve public hygiene, while establishing a Hawaiian Board of Health, the Papa'ola, to officially license practicing kahuna, also traditional medicine. The Mo'i also asked the legislature to create exemptions for large families and to allow remarriage within a year of divorce. And then lastly, he also participated in the public baptism of 2 children at Kaneohe Protestant Church. Although these measures, both material and symbolic, were important, Ho'oulu Lahui was ultimately a repopulation effort that depended on the biological reproduction of Oiwi bodies and wahine labor, and labor in both sense of the word. Opinions on reproduction, bodies, and labor formed and shaped 19th century public discourse about how Hawaiians could and should reproduce. This chapter follows elite Hawaiian women's own interpretation and response to Ho'oulu Lahui, I argue that the organizing labor of these Native Hawaiian women ran counter to the limited gendered and racialized imaginings of oulu Lahui circulating in this public discourse, and I'll get to the public discourse later on in the presentation. Their commitment to material health exemplified a version of oulu Lahui that was not about surveilling sexual behavior and policing bodies, but one that gave life to the nation by prioritizing the well-being of Makuahine and their kinki. We can infer that this mission was incredibly personal to these ali'i wahine, many of whom had never had their own biological children, or some of them who had children who didn't see adulthood. However, through their broader roles and responsibilities as ali'i wahine, they're regarded as mothers of the nation by the Lahui. At Kapi'olani Maternity Home, I further contend, these maternal bonds are especially important in easing the apprehensions of Hawaiian mothers towards a Western-style medical facility. The women of the HHL intentionally created an atmosphere that facilitated pilina, and when we talk about pilina, talking about deep relationships. Go read Heoli's book. She has an amazing discussion about pilina, studying pilina in her work, and really helped influence the way I think, I'm thinking about these relationships in this chapter and also throughout the project itself. But this atmosphere which facilitated pilina through care, comfort, and community, emphasizing its function as a home for Oiwi mothers and infants. And so this is a photo from the State Archives. One of the few photos of, I think it's technically the only group photo of the women of this society entering Iolani Palace for Kalakao's birthday in 1886 with their kahi'i pa'alima, their nice white gowns. Just a quick presentation roadmap before we get into the weeds. I'll do a short introduction of Kapi'olani herself, then I'll move towards the establishment of Ahuhui Ho'ulu Lahui, especially in its kind of first early iterations. I'll cover some of that reproductive discourse that I talked about. This is primarily in Hawaiian language newspapers. Then I'll switch over to the beginning of the maternity home and the history there. And then I want to end the presentation with narrating a life story about one of the individuals I found in the archive. Born in 1834, Kapi'olani was the first child of Kinoiki, Kekalike, and Puhio Kalaniana Ole, were high-ranking chiefs of Hilo. She claimed a powerful Mo'oku'ohawa genealogy through her maternal grandfather, Kamuali'i, who once reigned as a li'inui of Kauai until 1810. As a young girl, Kapi'olani resided in Kona before moving to Honolulu, where she lived in the court of Kamehameha III Kauike'ouli. In 1852, Kapi'olani married another ali'i, Bennett Namakeha, and the couple sailed on the American missionary ship, the Morning Star. They also call the Morning Star Hopuau in Hawaiian, and they sailed to Fatuhiva and the Marquesas, and this is in 1857. Namakeha was significantly older than Kapi'olani, and unfortunately he passed not long after that trip in 1860. Kapi'olani, there's actually two Kapi'olanis in our history. There's our Kapi'olani that we're talking about today, but our Kapi'olani was actually named after her ancestor, the first Kapi'olani. This chiefess Kapi'olani. If anybody knows Hilo very well, there's actually an elementary in Hilo called Chiefess Kapi'olani, right across from Cafe 100. That Kapi'olani is named after this Kapi'olani. This Kapi'olani in 1824 had converted to Christianity, and she takes a famous trip up to Kilauea where she defies Pele. Instead of offering an oli to Pele, she offers, she reads scripture. She also eats the ohelo berries, which were kapu to Pele. And because she does this, she kind of takes on a kind of mythical role in the missionary literature as a kind of an ideal Hawaiian convert. But Kapi'olani, our Kapi'olani is named after this Kapi'olani in particular. A defining moment of Kapi'olani's early life was her guardianship of Prince Albert Kamehameha, who was the young son of Alexander Liholiho and Queen Emma. And around this time, Kapi'olani had herself given birth to a stillborn child, so Queen Emma allowed Kapi'olani to serve as Prince Albert's wet nurse. However, as many of you know, Prince Albert unfortunately died when he was about 4 years old. And it was really devastating to, of course, Emma, Kapi'olani, and the whole entire Hawaiian kingdom. He was supposed to be the heir. In '63, Kapi'olani married her second husband, David Kalakaua, and a decade later, the trajectory of her life would greatly change. In 1873, Mo'i William Lunalilo had died without an heir, leaving the kingdom's legislature to vote between Kalakaua and Emma, which of course Kalakaua ultimately won. Through the accession of David Kalakaua as Mo'i, Kapi'olani became the queen consort of the Hawaiian kingdom. And I also would like to note, prior to 1874, we know very little about Kapi'olani's life, particularly because she wasn't a Kamehameha. She, partially grew up off island, or not on Oahu, until she moved. And actually, I have a small book here. This is like the only book that was ever written about Kapi'olani. This little book, which is crazy. And there's actually the same authors wrote a accompanying book about Kapi'olani Maternity Home. But that's literally what the secondary literature looks like for Kapi'olani. And I don't think, as far as I know, I'm not sure if there's any photos of Kapi'olani prior to 1874 either, but I might have to go circle back in the archives. To begin his reign, Kalakaua toured the islands to formally present himself to the Lahui. In his speeches, the Mo'i declared that his government would ho'ulu Lahui to grow the nation. Kalakaua compared his nation to a house built strong by those that preceded him, but was now dilapidated due to population decline. He called for the restoration of this house to its former strength by removing the decay. And here Kalakaua ties the health of the individual physical body to the sovereignty of the national political body. Without Kanaka, either ali'i or makainana, chiefs or commoners, there would be no kingdom. There couldn't be no kingdom. The HHL's constitution noted that the society commenced on February 19th, 1874, at the start of Kalakaua's reign. Its first leaders included Kapi'olani as its president, Kalakaua as its secretary, which didn't really last long. It was kind of a symbolic position for Kalakaua, and included support from ali'i wahine, Bernice Pauhi Bishop, Princess Ruth, and others. And besides its central organizational structure, there were local chapters that sprang across both the rural areas of Oahu and also on other islands as well. Between February 1877 and July 1878, Kapi'olani went on her own circuit of the archipelago to rally support for their new organization. When visiting Kohala on Hawaii Island, Kapi'olani visited the Catholic Church there. And in a speech she gave, she says, "I've come to meet with you and share one of the solutions regarding our nation. We will help the destitute, the sick, the childless by providing funds. Treasurers and committees will be chosen, and they will manage and care for your funds. From this day on, remember, do not let your feelings be uncertain. Do not bemoan our help." The HHL generally relied on membership dues, 10 cents a month, as well as funding from both native and non-native sources. And as the organization grew, the women began hosting large fundraising events such as aha'aina, so large feasts, and also bazaars. And they're really, really good at fundraising. And I'll get to some of the numbers throughout the presentation. In its earliest years, the HHL functioned more as a social welfare benevolent organization. Its records reported some of the work completed in these years, such as covering the costs of the burials of 2 impoverished men, furnishing struggling families with clothing, and even providing a mother with, quote, a large number of children with a $3 a month stipend for like half a year. And from top to bottom, Hawaiian women made up the majority of membership of Ahuhui Ho'ulu Aho'ola Lahui. Newspaper reports announced the names of those women chosen to lead as community chapter presidents, treasurers, and secretaries. So this is actually this one of many lists in the newspapers of these different chapters, and this is a chapter from Punalu'u here at Oahu on the east side. On the other hand, ali'i wahine such as Lili'u Kalani and her sister Miriam Likelike were in the upper ranks of the organization. Some of the society's first ladies, as they were called, included distinguished women such as Irene E.E., Abigail Kwahilani Campbell, and Lucy Peabody. In the chapter, I give these women their own kind of individual biography. I don't have time to do that today, but I will tell you a little bit about the 3 that I just named. So first, Irene E.E. Brown on the left. She was the daughter of Kahu politician and historian John Wawa'i'i. She was incredibly active in the community in a bunch of different organizations. She had a particular interest in Lunalilo home itself. When Irene I'i passed, the Brown estate actually bought the land that Lunalilo home sits at now, and it was donated to the home for its new facility. And she also left a personal endowment to the home as well. Campbell, of course, some of you probably already know her, went on to become the president of Hanohano Dolim, the Women's Hawaiian Patriotic League, in the post-1893 overthrow of Hawaii, which opposed American imperialism, and a major instrument for the Ku'e petitions, the petitions against annexation. And then lastly, one of my favorite ali'i wahine is Lucy Kaupa'ulu Peabody, an ali'i wahine who was a great-granddaughter of Isaac Davis, and Isaac Davis is one of Kamehameha's foreign advisors that he kidnapped in the 1790s. And Isaac Davis married into ali'i lines, and Lucy Peabody comes out of that lineage from Isaac Davis. In the early 1900s, Peabody and her niece, Lucy Henriquez, set up a trust fund and land endowment to establish a hospital in their ancestral lands of Waimea on the island of Hawaii. The hospital materialized in 1977 as a Lucy Henriquez Medical Center, which is now the North Hawaii Community Hospital, and now part of the Queen system as well. Women such as E.E., Campbell, and Peabody were not only respected respected in the Hawaiian community, but also amongst the Haole population as well. Because of their organizing experience, their deep social and cultural networks, they knew how to skillfully appeal to a broader swath of society, especially when it came to fundraising and soliciting donations. Despite the call of Kalakala's motto, Ho'ulu Lahui, there were never really any clearly articulated goals of the project. He kind of just said it, he did some things, but there wasn't really like a long-term plan of like how we're actually gonna like materially increase the population. And I thought about this a lot during the project. And it would be nearly 15 years from 1874 before the HHL would even pivot towards maternal health, because they were doing, again, that kind of more social welfare work. And one of the aims of this chapter was really, again, to ask what exactly did Ho'ulu Lahui mean to people living in that time on the ground? How are they imagining this process? Was it really just about, was it just as simple as like, we gotta like make more babies and this is gonna solve our issues, right? So the general vagueness about Ho'ulu Lahui spurred public discourse about the Native Hawaiian repopulation through sexual reproduction. This discourse was rooted in recurring 19th century rhetoric espoused by travelers, missionaries, and other settlers, which rhetorically constructed the Native Hawaiian body both individually and collectively as disabled. As historian Douglas Beaton has argued, quote, the concept of disability has been used to justify discrimination against other groups by attributing disability to them, end quote. Similarly, scholar Ari Larissa Heinrich has described the body as, quote, as a physical and conceptual field on which illnesses play out and onto which they project their allegorical impact, end quote. Thus, Kanaka Oiwi were often blamed for their own demise, rationalized as a sign of spiritual and moral corruption. This type of rhetoric permeated into medical discourses as well. Historian Adrian Imada explains, quote, American medical journals characterize what they viewed as Hawaiian's domestic disorder: promiscuity, communal eating, like here in this photo of Hawaiians eating poi, sleeping arrangements, and the lack of cleanliness, end quote. Thus, the general discourse suggested that if the Hawaiian body was disabled through inappropriate sexual behaviors, then it could be rehabilitated through moral discipline. And so I decided to put my ear to the archival streets and pull editorials and letters that discussed Ho'ulu Lahui, published in the Hawaiian language newspapers between the 1870s and to the early 1900s as well. And it was also interesting, they talked about Ho'ulu Lahui outside of Hawaii. I saw in a couple articles. I can talk about it in the Q&A. As a whole, these articles written by Native and non-Native men, surprise, surprise, offered solutions which approach sexual reproduction in gendered and racialized ways and express a need to control Oiwi women and their sexual agency. So you might want to buckle up for this. Okay. One of the popular debates was over the introduction of koko ho, so this idea of new blood. An 1873 column in New Ho suggested the importation of other ethnic groups that were similar or racially similar to Native Hawaiians, such as Samoans, Tahitians, Maori, and Malaysians. Through this racialized koko ho discourse, the Hawaiian body would be biologically rehabilitated through intermarriage with ethnic groups that were deemed as similar or even superior to Hawaiians. Not all were in favor of that first version of koko ho, as exemplified in an 1876 letter to Lahui, which was a Christian newspaper, a Hawaiian language newspaper. The writer described immigrants as lazy and ignorant. If Hawaiians were to mix, it should be with, quote, po'e oke ano mai ka'i, those of good disposition, and what they meant by that was Westerners. In an 1883 letter submitted to Kunupepa Kuoko'a, the writer wanted girls' schools and boys' schools for Hawaiians to be established throughout the kingdom. More specifically, the girls would be taught English and domestic labor, house cleaning, how to raise a family, and when the young men and the young women would graduate, they would be kind of pushed to marry each other and then subsequently reproduce. And this is just like a couple years before the opening of Kamehameha as well, so there's some interesting things going on there. And this version of Oulu Lahui outlines an almost utopian Hawaiian future centered on the molding of heteronormative family units. The morality of Native Hawaiians, particularly of women, was a recurring theme in this discourse. And this sentiment was echoed in this particular letter by James Bicknell Castle. This is 1892, who was an American missionary, descendant and prominent businessman in the kingdom. Castle begins with the Christian biblical scripture, Genesis 1:28, where God commands humans to be fruitful and multiply. He writes, Hawaiians live lawlessly. People cannot populate if they're living like animals. Castle was especially disparaging of Hawaiian women who tended to wander about, complaining that diseases like syphilis had rendered women infertile and that Hawaiian women who engaged in prostitution aboard merchant ships were purposely avoiding pregnancies. And then finally, a 1905 article in Kunupepa Kuoko'a posits Kanohona Ohana, or like living as a family, or family-style living, as a proper way for Hawaiians to thrive, requiring the monogamous union of ho'okahi kane, one man, and ho'okahi wahine, one woman. And this particular article lambasts promiscuity, prostitution, as well as polyamory. And the so-called hana ino, as the writer uses that term, included abortion as well. Although there is validity in the need for safer sexual practices to limit sexually transmitted diseases, these solutions were couched in terms of rehabilitation and rehabilitation and disciplining of the Hawaiian body through religious morality and heteronormativity rather than public health. This is much different than the maternal health approach of Kapi olani and the HHL that prioritize the safety of mothers and infants in the birthing process, as well as the building of pilina within the space of the maternity home. You can look at this while I drink water. In the summer of 1887, Kapi olani took a far journey to the Queen's Jubilee, and she went on behalf of Kalakaua. Lili Okalani was with their other government officials. As I always tell my students, the Jubilee part is boring. It's all about the journey. So traveling across the United States and England, Kapi olani and company scouted a handful of educational and medical institutions. And so this is the list of these places. Then Princess Lili'o Kalani, who served as Kapi olani's interpreter, that's the other thing too. Kapi olani, I think she knew English, but she just didn't like to speak English. So a lot of her archive is also in Hawaiian language, or there's not a lot of documents that she produced in her archive. But Lili'o Kalani noted that the Queen was much interested in the quarters assigned to the women at Deer Island and went through them with careful inspection. In New York, the royal party went to Black Rose Island, which is now called Roosevelt Island, where Kapi olani examined its maternity ward. A year earlier, its leading doctor, Henry Dorigas, introduced antiseptic obstetrics at this hospital. This system stressed the importance of cleanliness and hygiene in staving off fatal sepsis infections during and after childbirth. And actually wrote a whole book that was published, I think, right around this time as well. Despite Kapi'olani's visits to numerous educational institutes, it would be women's and children's health that emerged as a top priority. The Queen had witnessed the Hawaiian population plummet with no discretion between ali'i or makainana. And I came across this 1864 article in Kahu'okapaki Pika, which speaks to these concerns. And I was thinking about this last night. I can't even remember how I found this article, but I have it, and it's relevant to this topic. It's in the chapter, but I can't remember what took me to this article. It must have been a particular word that was used. But titled Ane Poho Keaupuni, so like the kingdom is almost lost or gone. The anonymous writer likened the ali'i lineages to a tree that was once fruitful and plentiful, but now was like shriveled and stunted. And more importantly, the writer reflects on the significance of the reciprocal relationship and balance between chiefs and commoners. Without ali'i, there could be no makainana. Without makainana, there are no ali'i. The relationship between these two classes can also be understood as one between parent and child, particularly through understandings of Hawaiian familial structure, which included extended relatives and non-biological relationships, rather than a nuclear family unit. And of course, that was part of that discourse in the newspapers. The ali'i function as paternal and maternal figures to the greater body of Native Hawaiians. Ali'i wahine of status, like Kapi'olani, were often and popularly regarded as and described as quote-unquote like mothers of the nation. Kapi'olani has been referred to in these ways, and there's all types of variations of these phrases as Kamakua hine ho'ulu Lahui, the mother who increases the nation, Kamakua na kikili'i ma Kapi'olani home, the mother of the children of Kapi'olani home. Here it's important to understand that their roles as mothers are directly tied to their inherent responsibilities, and that's as ali'i, and that's an argument that I try to make in the paper as well. Because I wanted to be very careful and not essentializing like motherhood and not, oh, just because they're wahine then they have to act like mothers, but it really stems from their responsibility as ali'i first and foremost, right? And establishing a maternity home for Native Hawaiian women was a long-awaited dream for Kapi'olani. With $8,000 already collected, Kapi'olani chose to renovate her sister Kekalike's home on the corner of Beretania and Makiki Street. So this overlay, it's an 1897 map of Hawaii over Google Maps, just to kind of give you an idea of where that home was. This is Hanohano Street coming down. You take the right on Beretania. This is the maternity home. Now there's like a 76 gas station right there. You turn down Keamoku if you're going to Moana or whatever. But that's where the maternity home was, the original maternity home, which was Kekalike's house. Her late sister had given this site the name olani, which can be translated as a heavenly growth or a royal growth. So a very fitting name for a maternity home. After renovation, the physical structure itself was called Kahome Ho'ohanao o Kapi'olani, or the Kapi'olani Maternity Home. And there's other poetic nicknames that you can find in newspapers. One that I really like is Home Ho'olue o Namakua Hine Hawaii. And Ho'olue, when I was looking at the definition of Ho'olue, it's kind of funny. It means to bring forth many young as a woman who has borne many children, but also the kind of humorous part, as a hen that hatches many chickens. So you can imagine, again, this proliferation of infants that come out of this home. The home officially opened in June of 1890 with 5 rooms. Each bedroom was sponsored and personally furnished by the women of the HHL. So they would actually like name the room after the specific woman who funded that bedroom and those beds. The home was overseen by a 9-member board of lady managers with the help of 2 nurses, a houseboy, and a Japanese woman who cleaned and did the laundry. So even more stories of labor within the home itself. Kapi'olani maternity home was free for all Oiwi mothers and kept at least 1 paid bed for non-native mothers. The HHL women continue to stick with their tried and true strategies of wahine and bazaar. So these are just 3 of dozens and dozens of newspaper advertisements for their fundraisers that you can find. I didn't put the Hawaiian language ones up here on this slide, but in both Hawaiian language and English language newspapers. One of their largest fundraisers was in in 1894. It was an aha aina attended by over 900 people, and they raised $100,000, which is a lot of money in 1890. So again, very successful, very organized, and they really knew what they were doing. And of course, they benefited from individual philanthropists such as illegal wahine, Mary Elizabeth Mikahala Robinson Foster, a key supporter who made an early donation of $5,000. And I could talk a whole hour about Mary Foster, but I won't. Although the Kapi Olani Maternity Home was fully functioning and free of charge, its leadership did not see an immediate response from Native mothers. It was actually quite slow in the beginning. In the first half year of the home's opening, only 7 mothers used the facility. Why? Deliveries were facilitated by white male physicians along with a small team of nurses. Here, Dr. George Trousseau often volunteered his time at the home. He was one of the most foremost physicians of the Hawaiian Kingdom, very well respected by the monarchy itself. But even though he had this respect and recognition, Hawaiian women were probably still uncomfortable with some strange white guy being there while you're trying to give birth, and within a space that is sacred and intimate, right? 20th century scholar Marikabena Pukui extensively details the prenatal, birthing, and postpartum stages of Hawaiian childbirth. Expectant mothers would be monitored by midwives, and during actual childbirth, be in company of family as well, right, and other community members. Pukui also notes that experienced kahuna parakiki, so this is the expert midwife, could even call upon the gods to hold kaukaeha, so we can transfer pain from the woman's body to like another family member or another person in attendance. So this brief example illustrates the stark differences between traditional birthing practices and in a Western style facility here at the Kapi Olani Maternity Home. And as I was telling Claire, who's in my graduate class right now, I literally just pulled this map from the library on, when did we go? Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday. We visited the map collection. So this is a Sanborn fire insurance map. I just learned about this. Sanborn fire insurance, they did mapping of Honolulu for fire insurance purposes. And actually did have the block, the Makiki block for Kapi Olani Maternity Home. So you can kind of see some of the structures that were on the property as well. The nurse's cottage, the laundry, the little building on the north side is the outhouse. Early apprehensions towards the Kapi Olani Maternity Home are documented in newspaper articles in the immediate years following its opening. One article published in Ko Hawaii Pai Aina in January of 1891 calls to Hawaiian mothers to make use of the maternity home as a pu'uhonua, a sanctuary provided by Kapi Olani. In a persuasive effort, the article firmly insisted, hey, home keia a'olehe haukapila. This is a home, not a hospital. According to the writer, the usage of haukapila had a negative connotation and placed fear within Hawaiian mothers. In contrast, the idea of home elicited notions of aloha, of care, and of course, pili. Mrs. S.L. Maikai, who stayed at Kapi Olani Maternity Home for nearly 3 months, wrote about her experience in Kaleo Lahui in August of 1891. She gives thanks to the staff, exudes praise for Dr. Trousseau's skills and professionalism, and the length of Maikai's stay suggests that there may have been forms of postpartum care offered at the home, or perhaps even extended care for specific situations, right? One of the women who ensured that this maternal space felt like home rather than hospital was its matron, Mary Ann Lemon. Lemon's leadership was frequently praised, and she was a critical interlocutor between Hawaiian mothers and the Kapi Olani Home. The aforementioned Mrs. S.L. Maikai writes that Lemon operated with cleanliness and patience, as she cared for patients as if they were her own children. Maikai even dedicates a short verse of poetry which plays on the word ahonui, patience, mayao, which means skillful and neat, and mikioi, which means deaf, to describe Lemon's work. The Lemon family is actually quite a large family. They live down in Waikiki, also related to like the Holtz as well. Unfortunately, internal disagreements caused Lemon to resign from her post in 1897. A reporter from the Pacific Commercial Advertiser wrote that Lemon, quote, gave the natives confidence in the place so that women were no longer afraid to go there. These kinds of public testimonies regarding the safety and comfort of the maternity home are important in persuading Oiwi mothers to use the institution. The replication of maternal care brought a familiarity of community and holiness to the maternal space. Here I also want to say that we can celebrate the labor that went into the maternity home, but I also don't want that to be at the expense of like Hawaiian traditional birthing practices. This was not like the golden magic solution to saving Hawaiians. It was part of it, but it wasn't the end-all be-all. And I think this is super important, especially more recently with the attempted legislation to restrict midwifery in Hawaii, which would have definitely impacted our traditional birthing practices. So that's just my warning that I don't want you to walk away and say, oh, Noah said that maternity home saved Hawaiians. Don't say that. Don't say that. I didn't say that. Okay. To end this section, I just wanted to provide some turning moments in the home's history. I'm taking it from that one-story house to this $1 million thing we have now. After Kapi olani passed in 1899, her nephew, Prince Jonah Kuhilo Kalaniana Ole, became the royal sponsor of the home, and his wife, Princess Elizabeth Kahani, took over as president. The royal couple steered the maternity home into the territorial era. By 1912, the birth rate had significantly increased to 150 births per year. Thus, the leading women moved the home from Oulu to a nearby property with a two-story house in 1917. So that's the house here. At this time, patients could choose to pay with money or with makana or donations, kalo, fish, and produce. We gotta go back to this system, guys. The home also expanded its service to women of all ethnicities while maintaining beds exclusively for our Native Hawaiian mothers as well. Unfortunately, the HHL found itself at financial and logistical crossroads by the late 1920s. The current property and operations were falling behind medical advancements, and charity alone could no longer effectively offset the mounting costs. And so for the first time, the trustees came together and they decided to require a $25 admission for patients. A new Kapi olani maternity home was opened at its current location on the corner of Bingham and Punahou Street. It boasted 50 beds, an incubator room, isolation nursery, x-ray room, and laboratory. A March 1929 edition of Honolulu Star Bulletin extensively covered the reopening and featured a sentimental article about Achong, the longtime cook of the maternity home. At the age of 17, Achong immigrated from China and he began working at the home as its cook. Throughout his 30 years of employment, he had seen many changes, but still, he said, his greatest joy was serving the mothers and infants. And Achong remarked that he saw children being born who came back as mothers. And I thought that was really cool thing about that cycle. And he continued to cook for the maternity home for another 13 years and retired in 1942. And this, so this is all from that special edition of the newspaper that announced the new site. And this particular ad, so all these businesses that built the different parts, from the plumbing to electric to the medical equipment, they all had like ads within the newspaper. I actually have it, and I can show it during Q&A. But this one in particular, J.L. Young Engineering Company, which built like the physical construction of the home. J.L. Young, and I can't figure out if he's Hawaiian or not Hawaiian, but he made it a point to only use a full Hawaiian crew to build the hospital, this new hospital. So it says, we are in the advertisement, we are pleased to announce that this structure was erected entirely by Hawaiian labor and the materials locally furnished, founded, financed, and conducted by Hawaiians, which I thought was really, really cool and very, very powerful. The institution was also renamed the Kapi olani Maternity and Gynecological Hospital at this time. The aforementioned wahine, Mary Foster, which I told you about, left an additional $50,000 in her will to sponsor 5 beds with a preference towards Native Hawaiian mothers. These are the trustees as of 1929. One trustee in particular that I want to point out in the middle sitting down is Minerva Fernandez. Minerva Fernandez, if you guys have ever been to Punahou Carnival, if you've ever been to Farm Fair, State Farm Fair, any of the county fairs, you know Ike Fernandez. That's Ike Fernandez's mother. And they were very, very loyal to the Hawaiian Kingdom. The whole Fernandez family, if you look at the Kui petitions, they're all like a whole row of Fernandezes on that petition. I just wanted to point her out because it's kind of a cool story. And this new institution was well received, but it sent the institution at the same time into a 6-figure debt. In 1937, local businessmen voluntarily reviewed the home's records and determined that the debt was purely a consequence of the upgrades. There wasn't any mismanagement of funds or anything like that. Referring to Kapi Olani Hospital as a community project, they declared that the support would needed to come from the people of Hawaii, and this kicked off a massive fundraising campaign, and they were able to not only offset the debt, but also build a whole new nurses' cottage on site. And during the 1940s, the hospital finally began receiving per annum from the government, $35,000 from the territorial government. So after 50 years, they finally got like funding from the actual government, which is kind of crazy to think about. And they also got federal grant money. By 1965, over 100,000 children had been delivered at the hospital. This is how I remember Kapi Olani Hospital before those upgrades in 2016. In 1976, Kapi Olani merged with the Kauai Keolani Children's Hospital. The new institution became known by its current name, the Kapi Olani Medical Center for Women and Children. And to this day, it remains the only full-service hospital that specializes in treating women and children in Hawaii. And Kapi Olani now averages a little bit over 6,000 births a year. I think Queen's Hospital is about 1,500 a year, so it's quite a big difference. In lieu of a traditional conclusion, I wanted to end with telling the story of one life that emerged from Kapi Olani's legs. And it's not me, I promise. I actually wasn't born at Kapi Olani Hospital. It's not me. For those descended from multi-generational local families, there's a good chance that your life began at Kapi. Anybody born at Kapi Olani Hospital? Yeah, 1%. Yes. At least we have representation. It was where I visited even though I wasn't born there, it was where I visited my pediatric doctor all through childhood. And every time I remember, going to my appointments, either before or after the appointment, I always used to ask my mom, can we go walk through the nursery floor to go see all the little babies? And they're all in glass, and you see they're all in their little cribs. I thought that would always be my highlight of my visits to the doctor. And it's incredible to think of that all these infants are part of a greater legacy, right, that emerged from a single-story house back in 1890. And it's also natural to wonder about what became of those children and the lives that they made themselves. Maybe one would become a president, right? But it's also not about Barack Obama. Although Barack Obama is probably the most recognizable feature in the institution's history, the future lifeways of infants who became everyday members of Hawaii's community are especially compelling. And I was able to find one of these stories from the archive, specifically the life of this little baby here, Francis Andrew Imakulani Bowers, a native Hawaiian infant born at the home in 1900. And he was actually in the beginning of the slides with that picture of the mother. He was right next, his picture is right there. And he's the only picture that had both a baby and a name, so I could sleuth around. Francis was the son of Julia Ke'Ikaumea Lenny Lovell and Winfield Walker Lane Bowers. He grew up, he attended Punahou School, was a member of Outrigger Canoe Club swim team. He then took a leave to serve in World War I and returned to graduate in 1921. Bowers is also remembered for his expertise in horticulture, researching kalo, guava, and lilikoi at the UH Agricultural Experimental Station for 20 years. His most important project was on kalo identification, resulting in the 1939 bulletin, Taro Varieties in Hawaii, Oiwi, Bowers, and Takahashi, which describes 84 kalo varieties in detail. You can go onto the UH Press site right now and buy it for $15. It's in his 15th edition, which is how that's a testament to how important this book actually is and reference for our kalo farmers here in Hawaii. Bowers' descendants have also made impressive contributions to Hawaii. His son, pictured here on the left, Francis Miki Jr., was a swimmer, military veteran, and Punahou graduate. The younger Bowers worked at Punahou School for 40 years teaching math, as well as coaching swimming, water polo, and volleyball. A beloved figure on campus, Miki Bowers had a hand in bringing the iconic Malasada booth to the Punahou Carnival in 1957, which of course, as you know, remains a staple of the event. The Bowers Ohana passion for the ocean has continued with Francis Jr.'s granddaughter, Ka'iolani Bowers. Ka'iolani has been a lifeguard for the city and county of Honolulu for over 60 years. She's one of the few wahine lifeguards serving our county. And her life-saving service in her community has been highlighted by brands such as oulu and Toyota Hawaii. And it was kind of fitting too when I came across this photo and I started digging. I think Toyota Hawaii had just posted their little clip on her maybe 2 months prior, and so I just clicked, and it was just kind of serendipitous, and I was able to talk to olani a little bit as well. But yeah, that's the end of my presentation, and I just wanted to end with that life story as just one example of the life that came out of Kapi Olani Home, as a reminder and as a symbol of that legacy of wahine organization and labor. So go forth and ho'oulu Lahui. Yeah.